Good morning, Ayin Beis, volume 3. We are on page 1464. We finished the paragraph. To sum up, he's talking here about Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam. Ner, that Neshama is compared to a candle. A candle consists of three things. The psila, the wick, is the divine soul as it manifests within the body and the animal soul. The shemen, the oil, is the fuel. In this case, the chokhmah of the nefesh habamis, of the natural or the animal soul, that the divine soul trains and educates and tames and directs that energy of the animal soul to be directed toward godliness. And that in turn creates an oir, a fire, a flame, a light, a divine passion, and ava. And all the way to b'chol maidecha, because the animal soul makes the divine soul even more powerful as it's transformed. So what we learned was that shemen itself has two general categories. There's shemen de kedusha, what he calls shemen hatev and shemen hamishcha. Okay, and then the shemen, there are all the other shemanim, all the other types of oil is called chachma de nega, not chachma of kedusha, but chachma of klippas nega. And he explained so even shemen zayis, even an olive, because an olive is also from klippas nega, is also in that category. He brought the proof from the fact that shikha, that person that eats olive, it will make them forget. Forgetfulness comes from the world of not of kedusha, a world of klippa, with his element of dissonance. Okay. And b'chinas chachma denega, hu haseichel anushis sheyesh b'teva anushis. And from that chachma denega, meaning the shemen, this level of shemen of nega, klippas nega, that's where you have human intelligence, which also includes. Also, from Zeh Gamkein comes the seichel of the nefesh habamis. The seichel of the nefesh habamis. And to explain the difference, he said that in the Inyan, he said that the shviras hakelim began from das. So chokhmah and bina was higher than shvira, higher than the dissonance created by the tension of the energies and the containers in toihu. The chokhmah bina, there they don't have that element. At least pnimius chokhmah bina, whereas the external part of chokhmah bina we discussed does have a connection to Zah, but the Shvira begins from Zah, from Das and below, which is, there is also Chachma there, but it's not a Chachma pure intelligence, it's intelligence that's already associated with Midas, which means with Midas, firstly with the subjective emotions, and in generally with existence. So he explained that and there are two ways he explained that energy that's inside the kelim. It's either the chayes of the kelim themselves, the energy of the containers themselves, or it's the chayes like the neshama within the containers, like that which remained the netzutzas from before the shvira, before the breakage. In the parentheses, he addresses that. And from that comes chachma de nega, chachma de nefesh habamis. And he explained briefly that the nefesh habamis, like a behema, its main focus is its own needs. So the seichel chacham is primarily midas, zah, tivi be'etzem, that which is natural to it. So like an animal, all its interest is its own hanos atzmei, its own benefit, whatever is good for it, and that's natural to it. The same thing with the nefesh habamis. The only difference is in a human being, and that's why ruach habehema yuredas lamata, the spirit of the animal descends below, meaning it's focused on below, not on the transcendent above. Focused on below. The only difference is in the animal, it's completely purely its existence, but nevertheless, in the nefesh habamis there is some seichel. That's why the human being walks upright, but it's primarily about gashmisdika things, his needs, his desires, how to become wealthy, how to gain fame and honor, or how to represent his own self-interest and find merit in what he does. But all the seichel is shayach lemidus, meaning to his needs. And even the seichel, which is more, we'll call it more academic, like seichel, like he said, seichel tivim. Like that's not shaykh to midas. Like the seichel he calls chochmas hateva, which is like science, wisdom of nature, or astronomy, or medicine. It's also, our bottom line, it's about understanding the hakshama. It's all the b'chinas hakshama because it's all about understanding what makes it tick. What are the components that define the physical universe and all its details? Its focus is on the yesh, and not that even though it's coming from a koyach aliki, but the focus is on the yesh. By seichel aliki, nefesh alikis, the divine intelligence, the focus is on the ayin. How this thing came into being, what brought it into being. The process of ayin alikina mahava kol bria. And how in each thing there's the spirituality of it. And how that creation comes from a state of non-existence into existence. And the wonder of it all. And how all of existence is nullified and sublimated in its source. Mashenk in the Seichel Nefesh Habamis is the Aksham and the Yeshus, is about the very substance of the material of the object, of the entity. And that's because this ultimately comes from Ruach HaBehema, Nefesh Habamis. And Ruach HaBehema is shaykh more to Mides and to Teva HaKshama, which is what he called, which in its root is Zah. Chachma, that's in Zah. So obviously Chachma in Zah is a higher level, it's in Toyu. But when it comes down below, that's the Chachma, the wisdom that relates to existence. And that's how he explains the difference in the divine soul and the animal soul. With that, I conclude the summary, the end of the paragraph on page 1464. I did find that the Tzemach Tzedek found some more material that I didn't mention the other day. That Tzemach Tzedek, in one of his manuscripts, he actually adds this piece about the Shemen that we just read. And I just want to show you inside. He says, the Chachma Shebeseichel Anushi, he brings the different types of oil. He brings Shemen Aguzim, that's like nut oil. Shemen Sinenes, I believe, is what's sanan is what's sanan in Hebrew? Sadik Nun Vav Nun. Yeah, it's no. It's also, I think, in modern Hebrew.
Radishes. Snon is a radish.
Radish, right? Yeah, oil from radishes he brings. And even Shemen Zayis, he says, comes from Noiga. And he brings this raya about Shachich Talmudei that makes you forget the learning for 70 years. That's Mokam HaKlippus. And even the Shemen Zayis that brings back and returns that learning is Dafka L'misha Yuchel Levaro Lahalis. Mam is the language of the Rebbe Rashab, is straight from the Tzemach Tzedek's manuscript. And in response to the question, he says, like B'Shemen HaMishka Nimshach B'chinas Choch Milah Nimshach Ma'atika Kadisha. Like I said, because that's an oil that was produced from its root for the Beis Hamikdash. But the other shemen, all other shemen is Chachma de Klippas Nega. Just wanted to point that out. Okay. So now let's continue learning. Once we've established these two levels of shemen and the difference between the divine Chachma, the wisdom, intelligence, divine intelligence of the divine soul and intelligence of the animal soul, now he's going to describe now what happens as they interact. Because that's obviously the goal of a ner, a flame, is you want the shemen to interact with the animal soul, fueling the divine soul. So he's now going to explain the dynamics and the process for that. So let's learn this inside. And he says like this, page 1464, the new paragraph. He says, Valkain, and therefore, Haveda de Nefesh Alikis. The pages can be found at ayinbeis.com. Valkain, and therefore, Haveda de Nefesh Alikis. The work of the divine soul is what? Is levarer or lesakenes nefesh habamis. To separate, to clarify, and to refine and repair the animal soul. I'm sorry. Let me. The tone should be differently. Valkain, and therefore, Haveda Nefesh Alikis, Levada Lasakan, Nefesh Abamis, based on what we just learned, that the Nefesh Abamis, the Seichel of the Chacham, the Nefesh Abamis, is about Mides, and it's about its own existence. It's about existence in general, especially its own personal needs. So it says, therefore, the Aveda of separating, refining, and clarifying and refining and repairing the animal soul, where you're going to repair and where you're going to do the refinement, you have to go after the seichel of the nefesh habamis. Because the seichel of the nefesh habamis, which like you call the shemen of klippus nega, which is rooted in the shemen, the oil of nega, that's the place that you want to attack, so to speak. I don't want to use the word attack, but that's the place that you want to affect. Because it's ultimately, in the human being, it's seichel that is focused on what? On survival, on its existential needs. Even when we talk about science, it's about understanding this material world. So you want that seichel to be convinced and to be guided by the nefesh alikis. So he says the birur of the tikkun nefesh habamis is therefore is a tikkun in the seichel of the nefesh habamis. And the reasoning for it is very clear, because if you go after the midas are already completely subjective. Go talk to an animal or to a human being that's completely consumed with his own interests. If you're going to trying to talk to his emotions are, that's what they're involved in. Whether it's making money, or whether it's honor, or it's pleasure, or it's desires, or whatever the taivas are. It's the seichel of the nefesh habamis that you want to persuade. V'hainu, and that means, and what does that consist of? The nefesh alikis. That remember, the contemplation of the divine soul. Remember, that is all about God. The divine soul doesn't have any other interest except godliness, transcendence. So this contemplation of the divine soul, basagosa, in its understanding, bigdulas erein soif baruch hu, in the greatness, in the grandeur, in the majesty, if you wish, of the infinite divine light, ukahai gavne, or other elements that the divine soul focuses on. He uses godless, gedulas erein sof. So what's in that contemplation? You don't want it to stop there. You want that yavai, gam b'seichel ativ nefesh habamis. You want that to spill over, to carry over, and to arrive yavai to enter, to penetrate, also in this natural seichel, the natural intelligence of the animal soul. Shegam hu yavin esa inyan eliki. That seichel, also human intelligence, understand a divine concept. So when we learn Chassidus Chabad, for instance, like we're learning right here, it's not just the divine soul is understanding, it's explained in a way that the animal soul could also understand. The same mind that understands science, whether it's natural science, or whether it's medicine, whether it's astronomy or medicine, or the general seichel that we use in business or in our daily activities of the mundane world, that seichel can be spoken to also Elikus can be spoken to that seichel. That's what he's saying here. That's the process. That the Seichel Nefesh Alikish should communicate and be affecting and influencing the Seichel of Nefesh Habamis. Tahagam the Nefesh Alikish and Nefesh Habamis hema hofchim zemezeh. Though, as we just explained, that the divine soul and the animal soul are diametric opposites from one another, the two opposites. Their interests are completely contradictory to one another. Betachlis, utterly diametric opposites. Betachlis means completely, betachlis utterly separate or utterly opposites. Hein b'heseichel v'asaga shalahem. Both in the very seichel, the very intelligence and comprehension of theirs. Ta'aseichel the nefesh alikis. He's speaking about two differences between the divine soul and the animal soul that we learned. Firstly, in the very seichel and asaga itself, in the intelligence itself. Ta'aseichel the nefesh alikis be'etzem. The intelligence of the divine soul fundamentally, hurak binyani elikus. It's only in divine matters. I remember I quoted yesterday straight from Teireh. That's exactly those words. The name is sugul klal, and it's completely not prone. It's completely not capable of. Mesugul means doesn't have any. It's not just it does not involve. It's not mesugul. It's not crafted and shaped and potentially liyadiyas v'asagas acheres. It's having other types of knowledge or other types of comprehensions. In the Torah, he used not exact words, but almost the same words. I just want to see it inside. On page Lamed Ches Aleph, let's see. What was the language that he used? The Seichel Nefesh Elikis is Ikra Nefesh L'Miskamas, but Talmid Masechet B'Ein but if Ein Lo Haskola Acheres. So here it says more words than that. So the word mesugel means not even a potential, not even in the domain or capacity. Mesugel is more than that. It's not conducive at all. Any other word for mesugel? Anybody comes up with a good word in English? It's not mesugel klal, the ideas vasagas acheres. There's another word I'm looking for that's not coming to mind right now.
Not
so it's
capable?
not that. It's not capable is correct. Not mesugel. Mesugel means, like a machine that's not made for this. It's just the Nefesh Elikis is not made for understanding Gashmis, basically.
Not
or other
configured?
I would say not configured. Maybe that's a little leap. Yeah, but yeah, that's the idea. Yeah, well, that's correct. The ideas vasogas acheres that are not divine. So that's the Seichel Nefesh Elikis. What about Nefesh Abamis? The exact opposite. Vaseichel the Nefesh Abamis and the intelligence of the animal soul. Hurak b'tzorchei atzmei hachumrim. It's only in its own needs. B'tzorchei atzmei, its own needs. Not talking about the divine. It's completely about its own subjective needs. Hachumrim. It's crass or coarse or materialistic needs. V'askola rak b'yeshes hadover kanal. And the very askola, the seichel, is only in the substance of the matter. It doesn't ask questions like, why are we here? Or why was this created? Or what is its deeper purpose? Or what does God want of it? It's only about understanding this thing. It's like dissecting whatever it is that you're dissecting. Now, of course, a doctor or a scientist can include godliness if they want. But if Seichel Nefesh Abam is left on its own, could be focused only on one thing, on understanding the machine and breaking it apart. Understanding what makes it work, what makes it tick. So that's one major difference, that utterly diametric opposites. He's qualifying what he said. He's saying that the Nefesh Elikis can also converse with and explain the ideas of divine to the animal soul, even though they're two opposites. So we're in the middle of this, even though they're two opposites. Firstly, in their very seichel, the kosh came by midas. That's the seichel of the divine soul and the animal soul. How much more opposite are they when it comes to their very their impulsive, their emotions? That they're distant and separate from one another, utterly separate, even more than the seichel. Seichel is two different types of seichel, very opposites. But in midas, you're dealing with the very essence of what an animal is about. It's in its emotional needs, its impulses, and its reflexes, and its natural inclinations. So that's for sure they're opposite. And in what way? He explains this as well. Now we're talking not the seichel, we're talking about the tendencies, the emotions, the feelings. That the divine soul, its entire desire and will, and all its emotions, like ava, yira, love, reverence, chesed, gvura, teferes, heimerak lelakus. They're only directed toward godliness. So the mind is directed toward godliness, and the emotions are directed toward godliness. What does that mean? La'ava es Hashem uliyira esei, to love God and to revere God. Ulafayer, that's teferes, and to exalt Him or beautify Him, and lahoides, and to acknowledge Him. That's hoid. He doesn't mention netzach in Yesod and Malchus, but bottom line is that all the midas are directed toward the divine. But and what about the midas of Nefesh Abamis? By contrast, the midas, the Nefesh Abamis, hem gashbim v'chumrim, they're physical and crass or coarse. Shenim shechrak acher achumrius, they only are drawn to not loving God, but acher achumrius, everything that's materialistic, kibehem gashmis, literally like a physical animal. What is a physical animal drawn to? Not loving God, not godliness, to its needs, to food, to drink, to breed, to survive, to exist. So you see here these two differences. So it's all Hagam. So even though the Nefesh Elikis, Nefesh Abamis are diametric opposites, one in the mind, how their minds work, how their intelligence works, and secondly, and even more so in their midas, how their emotions work. And he didn't finish yet. Ruach ha'adam elahu lamayla. The spirit or the breath of man goes upward because we walk upright. It's not just physical; it's also spiritual. When we walk upright, it represents the idea that we are connected, binding ourselves and attaching ourselves to that which is above us. That's what means walking upright, that your head is on top and you're looking up. An animal walks on all fours, so its face is face downward, which literally physically, but also spiritually or psychologically, because its life is focused on the earth beneath it, its existence, the grass it eats, or whatever else it's involved in this material world. Like the Frierdiker Rebbe has an expression, an animal never saw heaven. Animals don't look up. That's not what they're made to do. A human being walks upright, and we raise your eyes to heaven and look. Even on a very secular level, how many billions, trillions of dollars have we spent just to satisfy our curiosity because we stare into the sky and we see the stars and the planets and we wonder what's out there? Animals don't have such interest. They're not curious in that way at all. They're not made to be curious. What it represents deeper on a spiritual level is that an animal is focused on survival and its needs. That's its job, its mission. And a human being, because of Nefesh Elokis, is focused on looking upward and on the divine, the transcendent, I should say. So what do we have here? Two opposites. So this is even though they're two opposites, the job, of course, is to bring them together. And nevertheless, the way God made it is that they connect and unite one with the other, to the point they become one, like one personality. You don't see a human being split into two. Even though we have a Nefesh Elokis on the right side of the heart, that resides on the right side of the heart, and Nefesh Habam is on the left side of the heart. The Nefesh Elokis rooted in and resides in the mind, as he explains in Tanya, chapter 9. And they're very different in personality, but they come together in one human being. We don't call ourselves split personalities. We don't call ourselves two people, even though there's two forces inside us. They come together, and not like two separate entities, like as one entity. This is from the wonders of God. I'm almost sure this is language from the Mittler Rebbe's Maimer. This is from the wonders of God. That he binds and connects two opposites. One thing with its exact opposite. Because these opposites, can you mix, for example, fire and water? They will battle each other. Fire will try to extinguish the water, will try to evaporate the water. The water will try to extinguish the fire. Here you have two opposites, so it's beneflois, the wonders of God to bring these two forces together. Every single individual faculty of the divine soul, meaning it's chachma, it's bina, it's das, it's chesed, gevura, teferes, netzach, choy, yesed, malchus, all its faculties, mislabish, enclose itself, manifests, umisachet, doesn't just enclose, you can dress yourself up in a garment, you don't become one with the garment. But here it's more than that. Misachet gets one. B'chol koyach v'koyach prati the nefesh habamis, with every specific faculty of the animal soul. So when you have one brain, one mind, and the divine soul and the animal soul both reside in that mind, and they both, in a sense, battle who's going to control it. But they're working hand in hand. They're not two separate entities. They originate as two separate, but they come together in one place. And that's why the same moment that you're thinking a Torah concept or a divine concept, a second later you could be thinking about something that's completely about klippas nega, about something in the material world, or even worse, something not appropriate. So it's mislabish the keiches of nefesh elokis into the chayvus nefesh habamis, which answers a question a lot of people have when they learn Tanya. Do we have 20 faculties or 10 faculties? Because it seems in Tanya he says there's the 10 faculties of the divine soul, and then he talks about the 10 faculties of the animal soul. The answer is no, the 10 of these manifest in the 10 of these, and they join together like 10 two sets of faculties that join together in 10 compartments that are shared by Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Habamis. So the mid of Chesed could go to Chesed of Gedusha, Chesed could go immediately to Chesed of Klippa. Same thing with all the other faculties. Ukamay b'seichel, like we find, like let's talk about the faculty of intelligence. Harima sheyaskel adam b'seichel aleki, b'koyach hachachma the nefesh alekis, that when a person conceives with his divine mind, with the seichel aleki, with the divine intelligence, with the power of the chachma of the divine soul, what happens with it? It doesn't remain removed. That is when you're right now concentrating on a divine idea, whatever the idea may be, or what we're learning right now, let's say in Ayin Beis, it's not just your Nefesh Elokis that's understanding it. Your Nefesh Habamis is understanding it too. It's mislabes b'seichel ativ the Nefesh Habamis. And he's going to elaborate more on this. But I'll stop here because I'm reading a lot, just if anybody wants to stop for any questions or clarification. But we're literally in the middle of the topic. He's going to explain in detail how this process works. Obviously, the opposite is also true. I don't know if he's going to bring it, that when your mind is thinking about, let's say, what great meal you're going to eat, or some other desire or pleasure you have, it's also affecting your Nefesh Elokis, because your Nefesh Elokis is bound together with it. It may not like, the Nefesh Elokis may not like that you're thinking about that, but it doesn't matter because they're both joined together. That's why Malum Yemotz, as he explains in Tanya from the Parsha Teldis, Yaakov and Esau were together in the same womb, and that's where they struggle with each other. Two nations within you are at war. So they can be battling, but they are affecting each other, as he's going to elaborate further. But I'll just stop here if anybody wants to ask anything about what I've read so far.
Yes, Rabbi, you mentioned that some people have a question about whether there's 10 faculties, kochos of the Nefesh Bahamas and 10 of the Nefesh Elokis, whether they're 10 separate or 10 together, but in the same kalim, but can go either way. My question to you would be, since the Rebbe says here that the Nefesh Elokis is the psila, is the wick, and the Nefesh Bahamas is the shemen, that would seem to be two totally different entities that would indicate two different sets of kalim for chesed of the Nefesh Elokis and chesed shel Nefesh Bahamas, rather than one keli with both, because there's two separate entities.
You're talking about physically, or you're talking about spiritually now?
Both, as a correlation.
Well, you could also say,
if bring the mushroom,
when you have a candle, we don't say a candle is three parts. When the fire is burning, the shemen and the psila become so joined as one that you can't tell the difference. You know that there's a difference between them, but they become one as well. The fire is burning through the wick, feeding from the fuel of the oil. So the example works fine. Anyway, that's just a quick response. But we didn't get to the conclusion yet where he gets back to the candle. He's going to talk about it. But that's the most basic thing. I mean, just a physical example. But you think about it conceptually, the wick and the fuel do join together as one. The fuel is feeding the wick, and you can't even, you could technically separate them. You could put out the flame as well. But while they're working together, it's one flame coming from a combination of a wick and and fuel. But let's see how he spells it out once he finishes the topic. Right now, there's no question that you're talking about, especially when you talk about Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Habamis, we're not talking about a physical wick nor physical oil. You're talking about the joining of two forces and how one affects the other. So, yeah. So in the parentheses, he adds now that the koyach hachab and the Nefesh Elokis manifests within the seichel of the Nefesh Habamis. So as I said, when we're learning or thinking or contemplating on something divine, your animal soul is involved in it. Because the animal seichel, the seichel of Nefesh Habamis is involved in that process. which is beautiful on one hand, because you're refining it as we learn. Every time your mind learns, it's not just your divine soul is learning, your divine mind, your divine seichel, your divine intelligence, but also that it's a nefesh habamis. And now he drives the point home in the parentheses, ulechein be'emes, and that's why in truth, ein hasoga the nefesh elikiz belakus lamato. That's why the comprehension of the divine soul and godliness below is not similar to the way it is kameshahu hasagosu lamayla, the way it comprehends things above. In other words, the nefesh elikiz, before it came into this world and before it manifests inside of an animal soul and a body, also understood godly things. In Gan Eden, the nefesh elikiz, the neshama, is learning Torah all the time. Is it similar to the way it understands things below? No. Why? Because once it comes below, it engages with the animal soul. It doesn't remain a separate entity. If the nefesh elikiz remained apart, then our asaga here below should be exactly like the asaga lamayla. He says, and it's not that way. As was explained earlier in a number of discourses, or kamadrushim, kamaduchtin is usually the right translation. Umakol mokim, this is all a parentheses. So though it's not the same level of comprehension, because basically, think of it this way: if the divine soul and the animal soul are like engaged with each other, of a teacher and a student, now you have to engage with the student. You have no choice. And the student is slower than the teacher, doesn't understand things as well. The nefesh elikiz above is like a teacher without the student. The teacher can learn as much as he wants with all his depth. So now it's engaging with the animal soul. At the same time, he's saying that doesn't compromise. Compromise maybe not the right word. It affects how the nefesh elikiz understands things, but the nefesh elikiz is still a divine intelligence, and therefore it understands elikus. Look at these words: binyanim ha'amukim, in deep ideas, v'gvoyim, and lofty ideas or high level ideas, ube'emek v'rechev, with depth and expansiveness. Erech means length, which means going very far down a topic. V'rechev, and expansiveness or breadth. So emek, erech, and rechev in physical terms is the three dimensions of length, width, and depth. But in seichel, explains a number of places in Chassidus, there's also three dimensions: understanding something, all the details of it, like the length of an idea as it continues to carry on. The expansiveness is broadening it out and understanding how the idea expands. And depth of the idea is the deepness of the idea. So all three are all available to the nefesh elikiz in its understanding of godliness down below. It's just not on the same level. And now, all this depth and everything the seichel and nefesh elikiz is doing in understanding godliness below is all coming in the seichel hativi. Seichel hativi is the channel is directly connected because they're not two separate entities. Nefesh elikiz is mislabish in the seichel hativi of the nefesh habamis. And he continues on page 1465. Ubekama mishalim. So that's the seichel itself. And then when you understand it with a number of examples, the G-dliness are comparisons, mahasogas hadvarim hativim v'chumrim. When you understand the idea, not just the first thing he spoke about was the concept itself is understood by the animal soul as well. But then it goes further. When we explain an idea, even an idea in elikus or in Chassidus, and is explained in Chassidus, it uses examples and comparisons from ideas that are dvarim tivim v'chumrim, like different examples that Chassidus brings, different examples we all bring when we understand these ideas. We're not just bringing spiritual examples. We're bringing physical examples of a teacher and a student, of the eye and the vision as we've learned. I mean, every example that we've learned is all examples from this physical world, which makes it even easier, it makes the case stronger that the animal soul is involved. Its seichel is understanding it because we're using examples that the animal soul fully understands. Shekol zeh, he now adds in the parentheses, mailim al etzem ha'or. All this conceals on the etzem ha'or. Even when the nefesh elikiz is actively doing so and affecting the animal soul, it's still, like you said earlier, it's still Mailim on Etzem HaSech, on Etzem HaEr, I should say, on the core HaEr. The Ilu HaYasogas HaNeshama B'lia HaMtsayim HaElu, because if it was the Hasogas of the Neshama without these interfaces, without these intermediaries, like we said before, the Neshama as it is above, without a Nefesh Abamis altogether, Nefesh Ativis, Ha'elu, Ha'yemeira Er Eliki B'Sagosa Harbi Yeser Bein Arech. The divine light in this comprehension would radiate far greater, Bein Arech, infinitely greater, much, much greater than they are doing right now. In other words, when we learn an idea, let's say in Chassidus, about a Lakus, as much as that, as we are learning the depth of it, and he did make it clear that it's deep and Eirech, Rechev, Emek, everything he said earlier, but still, because it's manifesting in the animal, the natural soul, and the natural seichel, it is concealing, because if it was without those garments of the natural intelligence, human intelligence, that understanding would be a far, far greater one. U'mekol mokim, and nevertheless, and now, being that it does have to engage with this world, the divine soul understands the inyanim chumrim, ubehem ba'al yoda masigus inyan leki. It understands it through, it understands the material matters of this world, and through that, behem al yodam, in them and through them, is how he understands a divine concept. When he then strips the idea from this islapsus, from the manifestation of physical examples and physical understanding, then the very core energy, the light, shines openly about it. What he's saying basically is, in this parentheses, again, the two sides of this, that on one hand, the divine soul is understanding divine concepts, and that's with full intensity, but it's not quite the way it is on its own when it doesn't have to deal with an animal soul or a natural intelligence, human intelligence. With human intelligence, it has to now dress itself up in those garments which conceal on the Etzem HaEr. And then when you understand the idea through those garments, therefore the Nefesh Elikis is involved and the Nefesh Abamis is involved, then afterwards, if you strip the idea from its physical manifestation and explanation, you can't get to the Etzem HaEr. He's not saying whether we get to it in this world or is that when the Neshama leaves this world and understands it on its own that way. You could say both, that hypothetically you can learn an idea, understand it well, and then you start understanding it so well, you don't need those physical examples, and you don't need so much the human intelligence part, so you can understand the idea in a more pristine, pure form. Can you completely strip it from the Nefesh Abamis? I would say no, because the fact of the matter is, as long as the Nefesh Elikis is down in this world, in our bodies, one way or another, it has to work with the animal soul. But I could see that after training and years of training, that the divine soul has been teaching ideas and the animal soul understands them. In time, what will happen is the animal soul becomes more acclimated and can relate to these things more, so it doesn't conceal so much the Etzem HaEr. So it could be that's what he's alluding to here, or not just alluding, he's really stating here. So let's continue. Oh, let me stop here if anybody wants to ask anything.
I have a question. It's a little off, but I think it's on target. When we say that we are taught all of the Torah in our mother's womb, and then whatever, a malach comes and touches us on the cleft of our chin and we forget it. So is it the nefesh, is it the actualize chochmas nefesh habehema that's being educated there, or is it the nefesh elokis that's being taught that? In other words, what aspect of the
my initial reaction would be the divine soul.
Not the cleft of the chin, it's the cleft of the top lip.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, sorry. But you understood the question.
Yeah, we all know that Gemara, that teaching the
Yeah.
entire Torah to the mother's womb, then we're made to forget. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So that's regarding the seichel of the nefesh elokis, nefesh habamis. What about the impact on the midas? Remember, we said the divine soul and the animal soul also are diametric opposites emotionally, because the animal soul's emotions are directed toward its own needs. The divine soul's emotions are directed toward God, loving and revering and connecting to our transcendent. So he says now the effect is also similar. And so too it is with the midas, that the divine soul's emotions affect the animal soul's emotions. Though the divine soul's emotions are distant from the animal soul's emotions, they're distant from one another, betachlis, utterly distant, be'etzem inyanam, in their core essence, they're not just different circumstantially, but they're fundamentally different. Shezeh chayfez belakus, v'zeh b'chumrius. This one desires godliness, transcendence, and this one desires materialism. Makol mokim, nevertheless, eifin v'achayfetz, v'arotzen the nefesh elokis, the manner of the desire and the will of the divine soul, who kafi eifin hatva the nefesh habamis. When it engages with the animal soul, it's kafi eifin hatva. It's not separate from it. In other words, it manifests in the same natural, we'll call the natural attributes or the natural parameters of the animal soul. What that simply means, he's going to explain, but I'll just say what it means. Initially, it seems to mean that when you love God and you have a deep connection, attracted to God, it's not just some type of abstract love. It's using the same tools of love that you would love something in the material world. It's directed toward a different object. Here, the love is toward God, and here's the love is toward a good piece of steak, but it's still engaging your love. It's not like you have two different loves in your life. The difference is the love going upward, or is the love going downward? So it's engaging in Eifnat Fa, the Nefesh Habamis, because they are joined together here. Ukamoi, Kasher Hatfa Gash Mishaloi. He barkovas b'chinas midas hachesed, just as his makeup. Hatva here means, hatva nefesh habamis means his wiring. I should have added that. His very makeup, his wiring. So the nefesh elokis's desires and emotions are channeled and directed according to the wiring of the nefesh habamis. Like when, let's say, Hatva Gash Mishlei, let's say his personality is wired. So simply, this is his personality, his characteristics that were he barkov is b'chinas midas hachesed. So it's a person who's by nature, the animal soul, his nature is a kind one, a kind nature. So that will affect that his avodah to Hashem will also be with kindness. So, for example, a person who's naturally kind, even though natural kindness can be a very material thing, but as Hashem, Avodas Hashem will also be, he'll be a Baal Tzedakah, for example. He'll show kindness in Avodas Hashem, like it says elsewhere. So, in other words, the divine soul, even though it's a separate entity, but once it manifests inside the body and the animal soul, it's channeled through the very personality of the animal soul and of the natural DNA, if you wish, the natural genetic makeup of the human being, or the natural conditioning of the human being. So that's how close they work together. So same thing with the seichel that he said before. So when we start understanding something, you start learning, let's say this, we're learning this page in Chassidus. Not only your nefesh elokis, but your nefesh habamis is engaged. And the way your mind works, he doesn't say that before with the seichel, that different minds work differently, that a mind will also affect how you understand the idea in Elikus. But in Midas, he says it very explicitly, that your personality is the way that your Avodas Hashem of the Nefesh Elokis will manifest. Umipnei, and due to the fact Sha'keiches the nefesh alikis b'mulaboshim b'keiches the nefesh abamis, that the faculties of the divine soul, mulaboshim, are enclosed, manifest within the faculties of the animal soul. Al kain ba'asoga v'izbonus the nefesh alikis. Therefore, in the comprehension and the contemplation of the divine soul, Yiful says Shagama Nefesh Abamis B'Sichla Ativi Yovenes Ayin Aliki. That will impact that also the animal soul, with its intelligence, its natural intelligence, Yevin will understand this divine concept. So now he's tying all this together. The fact that they come together, that as we just learned, the divine soul also works the other way around. That just as the animal soul is affecting the divine soul's way it impacts, the way it comes down, the divine soul is also impacting the animal soul's intelligence, that it should understand this divine concept. So they're both impacting each other. The animal soul is giving it a body, so to speak, of this material. In human intelligence is giving it a channel, a platform, I should say, for the divine soul to manifest. And on the other hand, the divine soul impacts that the animal soul should understand godliness. That's what's going on in this interaction between the two. So this is again explaining, after explaining the difference between them and the opposites, how they start coming together. He's not yet brought it back to the example of Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom, the flame that's created from the combination of the wick and the oil, but he's setting the stage and leading us in that direction. The Einzeh, let's continue. I'll go a little more because it started late. In the parentheses, the Einzeh rak mashanev shel kis mevenes eneliki bislapshus b'seichel ativi. He's clarifying. This is not just that the nefesh alikis understands the idea through the garment of the nefesh abamis that we learned before, but seichel ativi. In other words, you're understanding the idea through your natural mind. It's not just that. Ki'im shemishtadl, but there's a deliberate effort. It makes mishtadl. It makes an effort, umisasik, and involves itself in maseichel ativi the nefesh abamis. The divine soul is serving like a teacher, an educator, a trainer, a coach, guiding the seichel of the TV of the nefesh abamis, the natural intelligence of the animal soul. Sheyevin gamkin es ha'inyan, that it too should understand the inyan. V'yunachetz le'betev, and it should leigzich b'am. It means it should settle in. It should be integrated properly and in a good manner. The animal soul should like I mentioned before, a teacher working hard to make sure the student understands. So it's not just happening in passing. That since the nefesh alikis happened to come down into this body and animal soul, so it has no choice. The only way, just like you can't see things except through your physical eyes, you can't understand things except through your physical mind, which is the seichel of the TV of nefesh abamis. He says, no, it's much more than that. It's actually the divine soul's training and making an effort to educate and transform the animal soul's understanding of things. And when that's effective, that the natural intelligence understands and comprehends this divine concept, then that impact it will have, the excitement, the stimulation, the arousal of the emotions of the divine soul with a fiery love, with a burning fiery love, tislav utislayet, it will ignite and bring to fire and bring alive, ignite the flame and tislayet and cause the that also the animal soul should be burning with passionate love toward godliness. That's what happens here. Because it's not just, as I said, in passing. It's a direct involvement with an nefesh alikis is training and educating. So ultimately, it starts with the seichel. First, it educates the animal soul's intelligence, but then it will also impact the animal soul's feelings. Because the more the animal soul appreciates, and the natural intelligence appreciates transcendence and godliness, the more passion it will come toward that, and direct its passions in that same direction as well. That's the effect that the nefesh alikis has on the nefesh abamis. Okay. And with that, we conclude this paragraph on 1465. So let me stop. Anybody wants to ask anything?
I have a question. So in the
Just one
Mashalim,
second, one more second, just 1 second. Looking further, I see he's still going to be discussing this for a longer while. And that's when he's going to go back to the shemen and the psila, the oil and the wick later in this page. But I see the next paragraph is continuing this process. And if you may recall, I just want to make this connection very clearly. This goes back all the way to when we learned mutfa, murgish, muskel, the maturity of the emotions of a human being. So he spoke about the natural emotions, the instinctive, impulsive ones, and then how they start becoming deliberate emotions, and then how they become cognitive emotions, and how the mind trains the emotions. So this is very, very reminiscent and definitely connected to that process that we learned, the process of from the bottom up as we grow toward godliness. He spoke very directly about how we educate the animal soul that it should recognize it's good for the animal soul as well, godliness. So though he's speaking here in one context, but I think when you broaden it out and you connect it to what we learned there, you really start understanding the whole process that he's addressing here in this discussion. Okay, go ahead.
so thank you. So my question is, I understand how the Nefesh Elokis is essentially harnessing. Well, it's almost converting, if you will, influencing the Nefesh Behema. But in the Mashalim, the Chachmas Nefesh Behema is the fuel, right, for the Sechel TV to channel Elokus. And in a sense, not that I sort of got the sense, or I understood that it was the Sechel HaTivi, the natural intelligence, that was fueling the ability of the Nefesh Elokis to itself understand the nature of Elokus. That is to say, the Nefesh Elokis may have certain natural fundamental understandings or inclinations or tendencies to get, if you will, to understand Elokus. Nevertheless, the Chachmas Nefesh Behema has a certain acumen, because it's so good at surviving, let's say, so good at figuring things out for its own benefit, right? Nevertheless, you're harnessing this sort of diamond in the rough, this capacity to essentially enlighten the Nefesh Elokis. They're helping each other. Because
I understand what you're saying, but it's not what he,
yeah.
But he never said that. That was more your processing, because you're thinking about the fuel and maybe the wick. He hasn't come to yet talk about fuel. So it's not, so far what he only said was this. If you go back to the language, there was no such, he didn't even allude to that. This is...
well, I understand. That's why I'm asking, but the mashal says it clearly, though.
What does it mean? Which mashal? The mashal of the shemen?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why I always say, let's wait till the Rebbe Rashab finishes his conversation on this. He's going to go back to shemen. He'll put it in his own words. We'll get there. He's not there yet. Meanwhile, what he has said, and like I always say, I like to focus on what we're learning right now. Later in the page, he's going to get back to the oil and the fuel. Right now, what he did say is that Nefesh Elokis and Nefesh Abamis are diametric opposites. But then God, in his mysterious and wondrous ways, brings them together to the point that they interact with each other. The Nefesh Elokis, when it understands something, it's understanding it with the tools and the methods of human intelligence and examples and so on that the animal soul can understand. It's true, you can strip it from that and then only get the etzem ha'er. But it's the Nefesh Elokis that's understanding the divine through the garments of the animal soul. The second side of it is that the Nefesh Elokis is influencing the animal soul in the process, and to the point that it can actually affect its emotions to get ignited and so on. But he's not to talk anywhere here where that the animal soul, he's not talking yet about the animal soul's contribution to understanding godliness. He hasn't mentioned that at all yet, very deliberately, frankly, because he's building a case toward it. And then we're going to learn step by step. Right now, he's talking about how they engage with each other and they interact, with the Nefesh Elokis being the dominant force. Then we know at the end, we're going to say that the animal soul brings out deeper strengths from the divine soul. And that's what we'll talk more about the Shem. But he's not up to that. He doesn't discuss that. So if you want to learn in a precise way, like I always emphasize, you learn exactly what he's saying. The Rebbe Rashab has not finished the subject yet. And the Shemen and Psila and the is going to come a little later. All this is a long discussion that he began, obviously, on top of page 1463. First, we began with Ner Hashem Nishmas Adam and explaining all of this. And then the different levels of Shemen, and now talking about how they interact and engage. And the next paragraph is going to start bringing it back to the general theme. It's just, to me, it's natural. I don't allow myself to assume what he means by Shemen in this context. I know he's going to get back to it. So right now, we're middle of the subject. He's not finished yet.
Okay. The question, I think the question is obvious because the
but there's no question because the Rebbe Rashab didn't finish his mimer. It would be like the Rebbe asking questions and then he's middle of a mimer. There's no questions yet till he finishes. When he finishes, then you could say, I have a question. But I'm telling you, he's going to address, he's going to sum this up. That's all I'm saying. If you stopped learning Ayin Beis right now, you'd be left hanging. Yes, that's correct. Well, that's why, thank God, we're not stopping here.
Okay, it's good stuff.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, so let's stop here. Paragraph middle of page 1465. Yeah, good, very good stuff. Yeah, I did find, I want to state on the record, as I continue to research, I have found some more Maimorim that talk about it a bit, but I have to look them up. One is 2 Maimorim from the Rebbe Marash, which would be really great as well, because the Rebbe Marash perhaps takes the Maimor of the Mittler Rebbe and adds to it, and I want to see how the Rebbe Rashab uses that. And as I mentioned, I found some more footnotes from the Tzemach Tzedek on the topic. So, as always, we do more research, new things are discovered. And that's what, but I shall report back as I continue my looking into it. Mittler Rebbe still remains that critical connector, but I think now I found something with Reb Marash. I want to see inside. Yeah, Jay Nossi and Tafresh Mem. Good, got it. Good.